He slumped into the chair, hands shaking. "I don't know what else to do," Brian muttered. "Then learn," Thomas said, voice steady but cold. "Because he's still waiting for you. Even now, he's waiting." Brian couldn't meet his eyes. "I'm not the man he needs." "No," Thomas said after a long pause. "You're not. But I can be." A month later, a hearing took place. Brian signed the papers quietly, without resistance. Thomas didn't feel triumph, only a deep sense of responsibility. Jamie sat beside him, tracing invisible lines on his palm, whispering numbers under his breath. Afterward, Thomas took him home. The mansion that had once echoed with grief slowly filled with small, delicate sounds. The squeak of Jamie's brace on the polished floor, the gentle clatter of crayons, the soft hum of counting stars by the window. Each night, Thomas sat at the dining table with him. Puzzles, fractions, shapes, mental arithmetic, they came to Jamie as naturally as breathing. "How do you know all this?" Thomas asked. Jamie shrugged. "I see patterns like music in my head." Thomas remembered how his own son had struggled with numbers. "You're remarkable, kid," he whispered. Jamie looked up. "Teddy says, I'm just me." Somehow that was enough. One evening, Thomas drove him back to the bus station. The same bench, the same fading light. Jamie limped forward, laid his Teddy gently on the seat, and said, "So other kids don't feel lonely." Thomas swallowed hard. "Are you sure?" Jamie nodded. "Teddy's brave. He can wait." Thomas crouched and pulled the boy close. For the first time in years, the emptiness inside him felt quiet. The real shock came weeks before the headline ever appeared. Thomas hadn't just taken Jamie home. He'd arranged a full medical evaluation. During the tests, doctors noticed something extraordinary. Jamie's brain scans revealed patterns of activity far beyond his age, especially in areas tied to logic and pattern recognition. When the results came back, the doctor whispered, "He's gifted, possibly a mathematical savant." Thomas sat in the sterile room, staring at the boy now humming softly, tracing invisible shapes in the air. The same child the world had called disabled was performing complex arithmetic in his head before he could even read properly. His damaged leg had stolen his balance, but his mind, it was exceptional. The most startling part wasn't just his genius. When Thomas opened the small box of belongings Child Services had collected, there was a folded envelope, Brian's handwriting from the motel. Inside, "If anyone finds him, tell him I couldn't be the man he deserved, but maybe the one who truly loves him well." Thomas read the note over and over, hands trembling. Brian hadn't walked away from cruelty alone. Guilt, fear, and self-loathing had driven him. That night, Thomas parked in the motel lot, reading the note under the street lamp, wondering if redemption was even possible for men like them. When he returned home, Jamie sat by the window, counting stars. "How many are there tonight?" Thomas asked quietly. Jamie glanced back. "Too many to count, but I try every night." Thomas smiled faintly. "Then keep trying." He knew then that was the miracle hidden in the tragedy. The boy the world abandoned had a mind capable of changing it. Weeks later, a local paper ran the headline, "Bus Station Boy Finds a Home and a Future." The story highlighted how a retired businessman had adopted a child once called disabled, whose extraordinary talent in mathematics drew attention from a university research team. But behind the glossy article were the nights Jamie still woke whispering, "Daddy's coming soon." Thomas would hold him close, murmuring softly, "He already did." And in that quiet space between guilt and grace, between loss and redemption, both learned what it truly meant to be found. If this story moved you, like, comment, and share to remind the world that love often comes from the most unexpected places. Subscribe for more heartfelt, real-life stories proving kindness still exists in the darkest corners. A man who had spent years donating to children's hospitals now stood frozen, confronted by a life no donation could repair. Jamie tugged at his sleeve. "Mister, is Daddy mad at me?" Thomas crouched, swallowing the lump in his throat. "No, buddy. He's just lost right now. Sometimes grown-ups get lost." Jamie nodded slowly, clutching his teddy bear as if it could explain the whole world. By the time officers arrived, the boy had drifted to sleep in the waiting area. One of the policemen leaned close to Thomas. "We found the car abandoned near the old bridge." Thomas stared out at the horizon, the sun bleeding into night. He didn't know why he couldn't walk away. Maybe because he recognized that look. the silent waiting for someone who would never return. He touched the bear still tucked in Jamie's arms and whispered, "You don't deserve this, kid." When the officers asked if he could stay until child services arrived, he agreed without hesitation. He sat beside the boy until the last bus pulled away. Lights dimmed, silence thickened, and he didn't yet realize he wasn't just watching a stranger's child. He was witnessing the start of his own redemption. Morning crept into the terminal with the color of worn steel. Jamie was still asleep, his small chest rising and falling against the teddy. Thomas had stayed through the night, his jacket draped over the boy like a blanket. The police promised to track Brian Carter, but Thomas could sense by their tone that they had already dismissed him as another parent who vanished when life became too heavy. When the social worker arrived, a woman with tired eyes and a clipboard, she spoke softly. "Sir, thank you for staying, but we'll take it from here." Thomas nodded, but something inside resisted. He had seen too many broken systems swallow children whole. Looking down at Jamie's peaceful, unguarded face, he asked, "Can I visit him later?" "Of course," she said, though her voice carried the hollow weight of a promise rarely kept. Thomas did visit. 2 days later, at the foster center, Jamie sat at a tiny table, drawing circles with a blunt pencil. His brace squeaked as he shifted his leg, but he didn't complain. When Thomas knelt beside him, the boy's face lit up. "Bus man." Thomas smiled. "You remember me?" Jamie pointed to his paper. "Look, I'm making numbers." At first it seemed like random loops and squiggles, until Thomas noticed the pattern. Perfect circles, divided like pie charts. Beside them, tiny digits repeated 7s and 3s with uncanny precision. "What's this?" Thomas asked. Jamie tapped the page. Teddy said, "If you split the big one in 3, you get forever 7s. "Look," Thomas blinked. "Repeating decimals?" Jamie shrugged. "Maybe." The foster attendant chuckled. "He's been doing this since he arrived. Doesn't talk much, but give him numbers and he won't stop." Thomas stared at the boy, 3 years old, barely speaking in full sentences, yet intuitively mapping fractions. Something shifted inside him, a quiet thread pulling them together. That night, Thomas called his lawyer. Find Brian Carter. A week later, they located him in a motel outside town, drunk, broke, hollow-eyed. When Thomas entered, Brian bristled. "You here to judge me, rich man? You think I don't know what I did?" Thomas kept his voice calm. "You left a child at a bus stop, Brian? A child who can barely walk." Brian slammed a beer can onto the counter. "You think I didn't try? You think I didn't love him? That kid reminds me every day of what I lost. Laura's blood was on that floor. They made me choose. I chose him, and she died. Do you know what that does to a man?" Thomas's jaw tightened. "Yeah, I do." Brian paused, confused. Thomas's eyes softened, voice steady but sharp. "My son died, Brian. A disease I couldn't buy my way out of. I'd give everything to hear him call me dad again. And you? You had that, and you threw it away." For the first time, Brian's bravado cracked. If you love real emotional stories, hit subscribe. We post one every day. The sunset poured gold through the glass walls of Ashford Bus Terminal, making the empty seats feel colder, the shadows longer. At the far end of a worn bench sat a small boy, no older than 3, clutching a threadbare teddy bear. His name was Jamie, and one leg rested stiffly in a brace hidden beneath his tiny socks. He hadn't moved for what felt like hours, only whispering occasionally, "Daddy will be back soon, right?" He didn't know his father had already walked away. Earlier that afternoon, Brian Carter had driven his old blue sedan, the back seats scattered with unpaid bills, tools, and an empty soda can rolling under the mat. He sat a moment, letting the engine hum in the quiet, and then smiled weakly at Jamie. "Hey, champ, you like buses?" Jamie nodded, holding his bear like it could answer for him. "Want to go see some tall buildings?" The boy giggled. "Teddy too?" Brian asked. "Yeah, Teddy," Jamie replied. But inside, Brian felt sick. He wasn't taking him anywhere. The decision had been made 2 nights ago, after losing his last job. He'd watched Jamie sleep, the brace beside the bed, hearing Laura's voice echo in his mind. He wasn't asking for this life, Brian. You protect him. But Laura was gone, lost, giving birth to the boy now staring at him with complete trust. Jamie's leg would never fully work. Doctors blamed oxygen loss during delivery. Brian never forgave himself for agreeing to save the child instead of her. So that evening, when he led Jamie to the bench, He whispered, "Wait here, buddy. Daddy just needs to grab our tickets." Jamie nodded. "Okay." Then Brian walked past the ticket counter and out the automatic doors. He didn't look back. Hours passed. The terminal emptied. Lights flickered on. The last bus arrived, headlights cutting through the amber haze. Behind the wheel sat Thomas Reed, whose crisp shirt and weary eyes didn't belong to someone driving buses. Passengers streamed off, and Thomas noticed the little boy still sitting alone. "Hey there, little guy," he said softly. "Where's your folks?" Jamie hugged his bear tighter. "Daddy went to get tickets." Thomas looked around. No luggage, no other adults, no tickets in the boy's hands. Just a half-drunk juice box and a patience far beyond his years. "How long ago did Daddy leave?" Jamie looked at the clock. "When the sun was big," he said. "Hours ago." Thomas crouched, his throat tight. The boy's calm brown eyes reminded him painfully of his own son, lost 2 years earlier to an illness no amount of money could fix. The kind of silence that cuts into a man's chest. "You know your name?" he asked gently. "Jamie," the boy answered. "And your dad?" "Brian Carter." Thomas's voice faltered. "Okay, Jamie. Let's see if we can get some help while we wait." He led him to the ticket counter. The clerk shook her head. Nobody had come for tickets under that name today. Thomas felt the mix of sorrow and anger rising, the kind that comes when cruelty wears the mask of despair. He pulled out his phone to call the authorities, but couldn't stop staring at the child, thinking about the cruel irony.